I have lived long enough to know that opportunities must be seized or they will be lost.
Welcome back to Wall Street Radio. I'm your host, Tanner Yarton, here with Dan Young. It's the 6th of February, 2025. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the slashing of government spending by Elon Musk and his team, most notably U.S. aid and its impacts on the BBC and other mainstream media networks. We're also going to be talking about the impacts of earnings so far this year or this quarter, kind of what we're seeing across the board between large caps, mid caps, and small caps, any surprises, big happenings across any of those reports or sectors that are getting hit hard. In addition, we're going to be going over the article that's coming out tomorrow on our SEBS research platform on Substack, which is going to be all about eggs and the impact of eggs on the diet, as well as dietary shifts in a post-COVID environment, and what that's going to look like moving forward with a potential RFK health secretary position. Enjoy.
All right, where do you want to start? Where are we starting today?
Well, I think most notably we should be talking about the DOGE and how important that is so far and kind of what's been going on, what kind of lies that's exposing potentially, and really just showing some of the egregious overspending within the government.
Yeah, I think we should let's start with like the overspending in the government, and then I want to funnel down into some of the things we're hearing in earnings reports. And we mentioned previously about this having an impact on commercial sales.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and talk about that? Because I remember earlier you had mentioned kind of how it works, like how sales operates within the government from outside businesses into the government, and then what that looks like as it starts to get cut. So do you want to just walk through that once more, kind of what we talked about in the last episode?
Yeah, we talked about the pipeline and the acquisition of government contracts or federal contracts and how that takes place. And the whole purpose of DOGE and what Elon Musk is doing is essentially going to disrupt that entire process. So it takes about 12 months to acquire a federal contract, anywhere from 6 to 12 months. The pipeline generation and the sales that come into forecast for the next fiscal year happen in Q4 of the previous year. So if you're losing contracts in 2025, you're not going to be able to make them up in 2025. You're going to have to find revenue to replace that, generally from the commercial side or another revenue stream that you're probably not forecasting right now. And so part of the risk that I've been talking about for the past couple of weeks at this point was from the commercial side. Any company that has a large base of contracts or large sales number from federal government contracts is at risk, especially when it's US based. And this morning, a name that I follow and a name that I invest in, Tenable, was one of the first to mention that. And they forecasted lower because of the DOGE, I guess, interference or the new system and political environment that now these contracts and these companies have to operate in is making it much more confusing and much more difficult to forecast what our sales going to be from the federal space because there's so much slashing going on. And Tenable took it on the chin this morning because of that. It's still a strong company, but that's going to happen with these subscriber-based companies or these companies that have large federal contracts. We have now seen it again and again. Recently this week, Politico has been on the chopping block about what their subscriber base is and what their spend is with the federal government. And everyone's up in arms about, I forgot what the exact amount it was. Maybe it was $8 million that the government is spending with Politico. And people are like, that's a news agency. Like, why are they spending money? And then I saw the first comment on it is like, this is actually a Politico Pro subscription. This is the exact environment and the sales that I used to do with Bloomberg, which is media sales and subscription-based sales for these workflow tools. So essentially, Politico is a large competitor to Bloomberg Government. Bloomberg Government, it's a workflow tool that you sign on to. It's bgov.com. And then from there, government affair professionals, government contracting professionals, they use this interface / software to go about and do their research and their due diligence from like a legislative affairs perspective or government affairs. Like I said, government contracting, it's no different than like someone using Excel. Really, it's just like it's a workflow tool that someone's going to use to go about and do their job. And that's what Politico offers too. Politico Pro is the same thing. They provide different tools that people can use to help them perform their job. So it's not like the government's actually paying off Politico to say certain things, or it has nothing to do with the news aggregation or how they present to the consumer public. It's actually for a product and a service that helps the government go about its job, which is totally legitimate. And I'm the first to call out if a company is acting suspicious or if there's something nefarious going on. I am ex Bloomberg at this point, so I don't have any stake in the game. And again, at the end of the day, I'll call it as I see it, no matter what it is. It is very legitimate. So for the people listening and wondering about the tweets, and it's easy to kind of fall into a rabbit hole, whether it's on YouTube or on X, about what is the Politico spend and what does this mean? It's actually very legitimate dollars that are being spent for a business purpose. And then I sent to you, which kind of instigated us getting on the podcast, was Martin Shkreli posted out the Bloomberg contracts, and he's like, Bloomberg has this much spent with the federal government for data that is free, and it's almost $100 million worth of contracts. A significant batch of those I have knowledge on and have worked very closely with, which I will not talk about. But the one thing I can say is, I mean, truthfully, like, these are contracts that actually have business applicability and use case, and it's nothing to do with pushing media left or right or having some deep state agenda. It's no different than your company buying Salesforce or your company buying cybersecurity software. Like, these are just the government, the federal agencies, they buy tools and platforms to help them do their jobs from a due diligence standpoint. And these are what those tools represent. Now, is a lot of this data for free? Yeah, it is. But like,
So is everything.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's for free, but like, no one wants to collect and then cleanse and filter all of the data and put it on a customized UI work interface, right? There's value in obviously having that as one system. So yeah, it's very interesting and timely to see, just because I'm very aware of what that business is like on a personal level, and to see people kind of start pushing pitchforks towards the government. As much as I would love to be on the train of like, yeah, this is so messed up, like there's some deep state conspiracy, because I love conspiracies. It's like very legit. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's an interesting point you bring up with how these are just services. So assuming that government spending continues to get slashed at the pace that it's currently getting slashed, which through the last 14 days, last I checked, it was an average of $2.8 billion a day, which is on track to hit $2 trillion by, I believe, 780 days or 800 days at this pace. What do you think that looks like for the economic landscape? Do you think that this is tremendously expensive, in economic terms? Do you believe that this is just beneficial and we're kind of weeding out the bad and there's not too many underlying concerns here by doing this and cutting all this funding?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a good thing overall, right?
Yeah,
I do think, I mean, we need to reduce and become more like, if you look at it like a company and approach it as a PE would, from a cash flow positive standpoint, just reducing our debt, becoming more profitable as a country, aka as a company, especially in like a capitalistic society. I think it's healthy. I will say I'm not a fan of the way Elon's going about it. I have serious concerns, and that's something we should probably talk about at some point, whether it's this podcast or down the road. I'm sure we'll talk about it today just because I'm bringing it up, but I do have serious concerns about Elon's interference, the amount of participation that he's having right now within the government, because that gives me great concern about trust overall from a country standpoint as to who's leading us truly. We've always talked for a long time around who was running the presidency outside of Biden. And there's always these deep state puppets that might have been actually pulling the strings. I have to, as a person who's watching the news and integrated in the markets and the business of the US economy, it looks like Elon's pulling a lot of strings. And I know he has a position now within the government that gives him say into that. But I think I don't know, we're kind of crossing and blending some lines that I'm not a fan of. And I'm interested to see in which direction that goes. So like, am I a fan of reducing debt? Yes. If some of these charges are true about the reduction of spend to Gaza for condoms, or, some of the crazy stuff we're seeing that's like $50 million, $100 million, I agree with the overall standpoint that it's not an accounting error, right? Like, these are things that actually add up to have significant impact on the debt in our country, because we are spiraling into debt, as we spoke about last episode. So it does have an impact, but at the same time, and I've had this premise. I don't remember if you recall this, but 4 or 5 months ago, you and I sat on a Discord call with a couple of different people, and they're asking me my opinion on Trump. And I told them, what his policies are really good for the economy, but they're very dangerous for the market because they kind of represent two different things. And strengthening the dollar, there's also going to be volatility and reduction of the fluff in the market. And if we continue down this road of consolidation and cutting spending, it's naturally going to flow downstream into commercial and corporate entities. And that's going to have a big impact on earnings and the market as a whole. And especially as you talk about trade and the tariffs with China. So,
Yeah.
some of the biggest players like Apple and Nike, like Nike's not that big, but like Apple has such a huge, important market in China from production to sales. What does that mean for their business as it's a top weighted holding some of the largest ETFs in the world? So, there are implications. I think that's the problem with the stock market as the last 4 to 10, 10 years probably. It's just like there's this disconnect between, I always say it because it's like the first line I ever read in one of my stock market trading books when I was 18. It was, what is the stock market? The stock market is a barometer of economical function. Like that's what it is, but it stopped being that. And when it stopped being that, the way in which investments were looked at has just changed dramatically. So I think it's healthy for the economy to reduce debt and reduce spending and make sure that we're allocating funds and tax-paying dollars to the right areas that promote more nationalized health and security, but at the same time, overpressed interference from people who have a vested interest in their own companies, like Elon Musk. I think that's dangerous. And so,
Yeah, I agree, especially when it comes to Elon Musk and people in business that are also operating within the government is, that question of, is this a conflict of interest, and is what you're doing for the interest of the people or the interest of yourself? And Elon Musk a couple days ago came out and said, "Oh, I'm taking the position. It doesn't come with any pay." Right? And I almost wish that he didn't say that, because obviously what that means to the normal person who reads the headline is, look, he's doing it for free. Okay, well, proximity to power has so much more value than a government salary could ever give. So I certainly agree to a degree that I agree to a degree. I agree that that it may raise a conflict of interest down the road. Another thing that concerns me is Elon and Trump, both individuals with fairly large egos. I mean, we recently saw that Elon faked his Diablo leaderboard status by having other people boost his account. For those of you who don't know, Elon Musk was ranked like top 5 in the world, or maybe top 20 in the world for some video game. That ended. It came out that he actually had other people playing with the account to raise it on the leaderboard, because obviously he's super busy. So it's like, he's got a large ego. Obviously, we know Trump's personality pretty well. Is there a point down the road where maybe Elon Musk is doing too much and Trump feels like, okay, we're getting to a point now where he's taking my spotlight here, I'm going to have to take him out? And I don't know what that's going to look like, but Trump doesn't exactly have a great history of keeping people around that are very close to him. So it seems possible that that's another outcome that could come from all this is, Trump either cutting off Elon entirely for one reason or other, or there's some kind of falling out or some kind of ego battle there. Again, that's more speculative, but certainly something to think about, given the two personalities of the two guys that are making a lot of decisions right now within the government.
yeah. And I also think about the next 4 years and what that means for Elon Musk. I'm like very tempted, even though his companies are, they have great backing. Obviously, SpaceX, if and when it ever goes public, it's going to be a monster because the product in the market is so strong. But Tesla, I mean, it kind of depends on where they end up taking this company. But the interesting thing for me is when Trump's presidency is over, assuming a Democrat comes in seat, because I don't think Trump is going to end his 4 years like on a banger high. Like he may. Odds are we always flip seats from Republican to Democrat because the other person is running on a campaign of change. And when you run on a campaign of change, you generally win. That's always happened. If that happens on the Democrat side, are they going to throw Elon to the curb completely and dissociate all type of business operations with some of his corporations? because of how far of a stance he's taking right now, it's the problem with, when I think about it, Elon's just getting very personal. And if there's one thing that's always been known is like you do not cross personal and business. Like business is business, personal is personal. And he's taken a lot of this stuff on Twitter and with some of the things he's saying very personally. And that to me is where like, heightened emotional state when you're making business decisions is always a bad idea. It never creates for the right picture. And that's where I have concerns. Like, I don't really want the person in charge of figuring out what has good spend, what has bad spend with our US government having an emotional state that's heightened and a bias. Because at the end of the day, he does have a strong bias. And I don't think that's healthy. Like, I saw him retweet the Politico thing and saying, like, that's not good. Like, we need to check into this. Or I forgot exactly what he said, but it was some sort of retweet or comment as to like, I'm going to be on top of this. Like, this is so messed up. And it's like, dude, you don't even know like what this is. Like, I was able to actually figure out what it was in 2 minutes and be like, this is a non-issue. But if he looks at it and he's like, no, you can't have any partnerships with media conglomerates. It's like, that's a workflow tool. Like at that point, you need to look at like every software implemented with every government system, which it just, it leaves a lot of room for bias. Kind of another tangent I wanted to talk about, but Palantir had explosive earnings reaction. Palantir is also a company that leans heavily right. And for a company that does a lot of federal contracting and government-based products, I believe that they're in a perfect position to capitalize on the environment that we're in because they've always been pro-Trump. And like Joe Lonsdale has been very adamant that he's Republican and right-leaning. That is paying dividends right now. And I have to imagine if he continues that type of operational understanding and influence, it's going to help him win contracts with the US federal government, especially with Musk overseeing a lot of these actions. So I don't know, man. I'm a little concerned, to be honest with you, about Musk's interactions right now and his oversight. It's a big job and it's a lot of responsibility. And I'm not sure the world's richest man should be the one doing it per se. Like I actually thought Vivek would be more involved, but it seems like he's not.
It's going to be interesting to see how it proves down the road. When he first took over Twitter, there was about a month of commentary where he was talking about all the egregious overspending and then it subsided rather quickly. If it's anything like that, his takeover of Twitter, after about a month, he'll just get back to work and talk less about the day-to-day operation and the constant retweeting and the quote tweeting of everything that's going on. I think right now he's still in that kind of like have to prove that it was a good decision for him to do this. And then once he's proven it, then it will subside and go back to normal. And now our comments are negatively connotated against Elon here, but it's important, at least for me, it's important to consider that I think these are good things, right? Cutting all of this spending. It's just, the worries of having somebody who is like Elon Musk at the helm of the ship and what that could mean. Because, like you said, if his bias leaks in too heavily, well, suddenly you can get some pretty serious public crash outs. And that's just a bad look for the whole party. And then it actually leaks over into Trump as well. And
yeah, I completely agree. It's not a total Elon Musk bash party, but it's noted worry. And that's from someone who rides the middle and is able to see a lot of different things from like both sides of the argument. A lot of the times I want the economy to be healthier. I want to reduce the amount of debt. I want to make sure we focus and allocate our spending of tax dollars to places that actually promote, again, the common good of the United States and the people associated with it. At the same time, I just want to make sure that corruption and bias doesn't bleed into government because you got to separate your emotions and not your political views from the government, the responsibility that you have in a position within the government where you're overseeing the benefit and the health and the recommendation to support like hundreds of millions of people. You just have to be very, very careful about who you select. And I don't know, it'll be interesting. It's going to come to a head. I have no doubt about that. I think in the next 4 to 6 months, we're going to see this come to a head, and Trump is either going to tell Elon to slow down and calm down because it's actually going to impede with what Trump wants to do to a degree, because he's just going to make immediate enemies. And you can't just troll people on Twitter. Like I see him troll people like politicians all the time on Twitter. Like you can't do that. That's not how you, again, as someone who operated in the government side of things, that's a very short-term game to play, because once you burn those bridges, it's all about what you know and who you know in government. And Elon, even though he's wealthy and he's powerful, that's only now. Like in 4 years, the tone's going to change dramatically, and it could change dramatically in just 2 years.
Our pod happens frequently enough where we can catch all these changes. I couldn't imagine being somebody who doesn't look at the news every day during a period of time like this, or whose investment portfolio relies on like monthly check-ins or quarterly check-ins, because things are happening so fast, and it's going to require a tremendous amount of updates as frequent as possible. And hopefully we can keep that up in here. But we do have a new article coming out tomorrow. It was supposed to come out today, but yesterday was Dan's birthday. If anybody would like to drop a happy birthday in the comments or something.
There we go.
His birthday, as well as my mom's birthday. So we were away from the desks yesterday to finish that up, but we're going to release it tomorrow. And it's all about the development of healthier diets in America, a shift towards just better eating and less processed foods in a post-COVID environment. With RFK coming in, we expect that trend to continue. We've outlined a few businesses that we think are going to be positively impacted by that. And the main focus being eggs as well, because there's a lot of companies now that are popping up, both public and private, that are big fans of the staple food, the staple grocery, and are bringing it to market in a number of different ways. Most notably, the organic, pasture-raised, kind of homegrown type feel, which is really starting to gain traction here in the States. And one company in particular, Vital Farms, is all over it. So talking about them, talking about RFK, and really just the change in consumer diets post-COVID. I think a lot of people, after the whole vaccine craze happened, they realized, hey, wait a minute, maybe not only should I be paying attention to what's going in my body via vaccines and jabs, but also what am I just putting in my mouth?
So, like, talking about like a sneak peek for the article in terms of some of the egg stuff. I know
Yeah.
when we talked earlier, we were looking at some companies that are having not only shocking earnings, but big yield, big dividends pushing out. Again, a little bit of a preface for what they can expect tomorrow. What are some things that are on top of your mind as you've taken a deeper dive into this industry and this specific niche sector of the market? Like, what are some things that are kind of questions in your mind about sustainability of this, or
Yeah.
whatever?
Well, I think it's two things. Number one, it's that consumer shift of I need to start paying attention to what I'm putting in my body. And then number two, it's the classic play, and not that it's bad, but it's the classic play on, oh, I don't want my animals to be locked in a box. I want them to have free range to walk around and whatever. And because I think eggs are so cheap to begin with, people don't mind paying double for eggs, because, you go from $2 a dozen to, $4 or $5 a dozen. And I don't think people really have too much trouble paying that for the organic, pasture raised, kind of homegrown type eggs. So I think that consumer shift, number one, is why we're seeing such an interest in this sector in particular. And then also just eggs being such a great staple. You're seeing so many more people interested in fitness and working out in a post-COVID environment. And for any young person, I mean, I'm 24. I eat eggs every day, like usually 4 to 6 of them a day. Pretty much any of my friends that work out, guys or girls, they're in the same boat where they're just crushing eggs, egg whites. And, if you can buy one where the chickens had time to roam around before she lays it, all the better.
You're also, what, 6'5", 330?
I'm 6'7", 412.
6 eggs a day. Goddamn, son.
I was talking to my parents yesterday, or my mom and my stepdad, and they were talking about how they saw my younger sister's boyfriend, and he eats 10 eggs a day, and he's like 5'9", 160. What is happening?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Does he work out?
Yeah.
Does he listen to the pod?
Honestly, no, but I could probably get him to.
So let's just roast him then.
No, that's crazy. 10 eggs a day is absolutely nutso. But in any case, yeah. And these companies that are making them, by the way, they're just absolutely printing money. I mean, we were looking at Cal Maine earlier, and I mean, the turnaround has been unbelievable on earnings per share. Their ability to charge more for these eggs while seeing minimal impact on cost to do it is just, I mean, they've gone from what, an 11-cent dividend last year to $1.48 this year.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say 10 eggs. That dude's eating 10 eggs in this economy. That's crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, if you're trying to stay healthy and you're trying to get fit, people don't mind paying for the trade-off. And I think that's kind of that post-COVID environment that we've talked about in a number of industries, which is post-COVID, people are looking for things that are making impact on their life. I think there was a swing towards, just fast and easy pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, there's kind of been a return to actually giving a shit about what's going in your body, what you're wearing, its impacts on your health, because COVID brought up a ton of questions about your personal health and how much you actually care about your health, right? Because how do you go onto your internet forum and make huge complaints about the vaccines and all this and that, and then you drive to McDonald's and you eat a double quarter pounder with enough nitrates to kill a small colony of ants?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. The big thing is, where does this go downstream? I feel like I agree with that, and I want to see how the market will respond from a commercial standpoint and how they're going to fix and answer the problem which is coming, which is small local, whether it's pop-up farm to table, local shops that do, again, like small batch goods, local freshly made items. Like, that stuff is the future. 10, 15 years ago, when I was going through school for nutrition science, I made a bet with my uncle that Cheerios would have a protein cereal in the future. And he was so bearish on that. And it's because when I was in college, I started a protein snack company because I saw this all coming, whether it was Quest or Lenny and Larry's, these healthy protein baked goods, right? People want to eat and feel good about what they're eating, but they also want to indulge. Like, that was very easy to see, at least for me, who was like very involved in the nutrition and health space 15 years ago. I started my own company called Pack Protein, which didn't go that far because I was in college. I was broke. I didn't have a lot of money. Still a lot of the same ideas with it. But that iteration of, how did the General Mills, how did some of these food companies respond to needing to make up this market of health, nutrition, protein focused items? The problem there, that's kind of easy for them to get into because they use a lot of cheap substitutes like brown rice syrup, or if you look on the back of some of these ingredients that are high protein snacks, just look at the first or second ingredient. If it's not like a whey based protein, you can pretty much see easily, is it like rice protein isolate? Like, that's just disgusting. Like, that stuff's not good for you, but it's an easy substitute to add to items that can be mass manufactured and then sold and still highly profitable for these companies. That's why also, when you go look at some of the protein companies that exist in the cereal section, is it Magic Spoon? Like Magic Spoon cereal, I think that's like a high protein cereal that they sell now. It's $8 or $9 a box. It's expensive because that stuff is expensive to make. And so again, like, it's kind of easy for these large players in the food manufacturing business to be able to keep up to par with the consumer trends around high protein, like health forward things, because they're just using cheaper substitutes. And most people are not smart enough to look at the nutrition label and know what that means. However, what are they going to do when people want farm fresh? When they want to go down the street to their local farmer, or they want to grow their own vegetables and grow their own things in their backyard, and that goes right into their body. Like, that is the wave that we're going to be seeing in the next 1 to 5 years. Like, that is the food economy moving forward. There will be a subset of people that continue to still eat fast food, and they go to Kroger, or they go to Walmart for their food. But I'm telling you, a lot of people are going to push towards this new wave, because especially with the US becoming more profitable, especially if Trump does his thing and we become more successful as a company, people are going to want nicer things. They're going to care, like you said, coming out of COVID, about their health. And so I'm just curious, are we going to have like a Kroger's farmers market? Like, I wonder if they start partnering with local farmer producers and get a cut of revenue in some shape or way. I just know that that's a small segment of the market today. That's going to be a large segment tomorrow. And I bet you they already have teams on the back end trying to formulate, how do we make up this subset in this trend that we're finding, which is health forward, nourishment, nutrition forward.
I think Vital Farms is a good example of a company that, despite having a small network of farms, is able to get a product that doesn't have a super long shelf life to the entirety of the United States quite quickly. And I think that's a product of the kind of post-COVID commerce market where, we're seeing Amazon able to get products a lot faster than they were previously before COVID. And now that's kind of playing out in the downstream with something like a Vital Farms, which is obviously ran through Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon. So I think to your point about farm to table and getting super fresh food around the country, the post-COVID commerce environment is going to support that. And I would imagine we only start to see more, like you said, maybe a Kroger's farm market where Kroger uses their distribution to get farm to table goods to consumers, no matter where they are or how close they might actually be to those farms.
Yeah, maybe it's done through acquisition, right? M&A. Maybe you see big players like Tyson's or any of like the large food manufacturers take out a smaller company like we're talking about, like Cal-Maine.
Yeah. Walmart would be a really interesting one to think about in regards to M&A or starting this kind of farmers market type thing. I mean, Walmart already has okay produce. I don't think it's anything anybody calls home about. They certainly don't like it or prefer it to Aldi or like a Wegmans or Costco. If they want to offer farm fresh or farm to table at a reasonable price, which is Walmart's bread and butter, maybe they do start to acquire large swaths of family farms and whatnot to kind of bring that offering on their distribution network to their stores.
Yeah, and it does matter too if we're able to control the bird flu that's going on, right? Like the way that works for people that know is if one chicken tests positive for bird flu, they have to kill everyone. So yeah, so it's pretty ruthless and savage. It's like if someone in your family tested positive for the flu, they just off you all. But that's over 20, as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, is over 20 million chickens. And in North Carolina, like very, very large producer of poultry, like it's impacted us greatly. And we talked about it last week with the implications with now the Canadian tariffs or the scare that we talked about. Like Canada exports a ton of poultry to the US. So the impact that has obviously on the prices, hopefully that steadies a little bit now that Canada, Mexico, and the US are talking and having more of a negotiated agreement about what the tariffs should be or will be, or the partnership as a whole. You and I were not surprised by that. We talked about that usually he comes out swinging hard and then there's this negotiation period, which is very business forward. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see the direction in which the larger commercial entities take this direction, which is like, if the bird flu continues, how do they, where is that subset for their customer base? Are they purchasing a Vital Farms or a Cal-Maine? Because right now, Cal-Maine, I mean, their stock for the last 2 quarters was hovering and increasing from like 70 to 100, and they're paying out $1 dividend and then $1.50 dividend. And at that point, like you're getting significant yield and a high return, like over 30% return in a half period for that company, which is like unheard of. So I'm curious if they're going to continue the tailwinds or if they use this opportunity to get bought out.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that in the article, which I guess is something that we might have to go back in and add. But yeah, the flus have certainly added a bit onto the cost of those high quality eggs from the organic and farm raised areas of the market. I know Costco didn't have their brown organic cage free eggs for 3 weeks. I was going in once a week and I didn't see them for 3 weeks. I was having to buy the white ones, not the brown ones. And that's a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Anything else that you want to add with the pod?
No, I mean, I think we wanted to talk about earnings as well, kind of what's going on so far, what we're seeing this season. I think it's been a mixed bag, to be honest. I've been watching the market and, I had some commentary on my Twitter about this. Earnings season is great when you either have long droughts in the market or you've got, specific sectors or a super focused market where much of the market's being brought down and you only have focused in a couple of names. But if you have just a generally uptrending market, it's kind of difficult to get some of the great earnings season opportunities that I like to see. I know you don't really trade this way, but I do. The EPs, the episodic pivots, those big changes in businesses where you get these massive surprises and kind of like everybody on the street is surprised, and then also the company is surprised as well. Like maybe they have first profitable quarter in 12 quarters, or they're announcing a dividend for the first time ever because of record EPS growth or something like that. And we didn't really get much of that this season. Only one name has really been a standout for me. Apps put out a great report, and AMSC also put out a pretty solid report today. But besides that, this season's been kind of a mixed bag for earnings, and I haven't seen a ton of that opportunity that I like to see on earnings, which are large thrusting candles or episodic pivots, fundamental turnarounds in business.
Did you see by chance the Sonos earnings?
No, let me go ahead and pull them up though.
Yes,
You'd be
Sonos actually
certified.
had a very, very big earnings report and a large reaction today that did get reversed. But Sonos, I mean, I've been a purchaser of Sonos for a long time. Their speakers are quality. At this valuation that they're currently operating in and with the earnings that they just put forward, it was like a really big surprise. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they're a target of M&A in the future. They'd probably be a nice subset revenue stream for a larger company. But yeah.
They've seen a pretty healthy decline in revenue though since 2020 and 2021 because they make like those home speaker systems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder maybe if there's a little bit of a headwind, which is less people spending time in their house post COVID,
Yeah, I
not
mean,
spending as much.
yeah, but also like you think about construction, so multifamily is going to be one of the biggest benefits because they put their sound systems into the lobbies or like any large commercial real estate opportunities.
Yeah, I'll have to take a closer look at that report, but just looking at them as a whole, I don't see anything that I'm super excited about, but maybe that's just because I'm not getting a great look here. Not sure. But otherwise, yeah, I didn't see a whole lot this season. It's kind of been kind of dead. Any opinions on like crypto MSTR moving forward? I know they just reported, but earnings are a non-event for something like that, where the price is just so disconnected from what the company is actually doing. From a financial reporting standpoint, MSTR is a disaster and worth a lot less. But because of their Bitcoin holdings and their Bitcoin strategy, it's not the same. Like what they would report on earnings is not impactful to the price at all because their main strategy has nothing to do with their financial reporting.
Yeah, I'm so bearish on MicroStrategy. I know a lot of people listening might be upset about that, but I can't stand Sailor. And I didn't really have anything against him. I had nothing against MicroStrategy at all or him until the last 3 months when he's just taken more of a public face about Bitcoin and he's like full stand on it now. He's rebranding MicroStrategy to just strategy, which is the biggest bear flag of all time. It just there's nothing proprietary about it. I don't like when people come on and like Bitcoin should be $2 million per coin and we're gonna keep buying no matter what. It's like again with like there's emotion behind the business. Anytime you blend emotion and business, you start getting a different perception of reality, and that's where I just fear he's at right now, which is like I understand Bitcoin has been successful. I understand cryptocurrency has been successful for those invested in it in the last 15 years. I completely understand that. But like you still need to have fiscal due diligence and like a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to not become blinded about one single thing that's going to make your engine run. Like, where's your diversification? It's all just Bitcoin. At this point, you just invest in Bitcoin. Like, why would you invest in MicroStrategy or strategy as that is? So, yeah, I'm not a fan. I've been wanting to short MicroStrategy for at least the last 2 months. I haven't done it yet, but it's something that I'm looking into doing just because of the leverage that they have, the potential capitulation that could happen if Bitcoin even suffers a 5 to 10% loss. MicroStrategy is going to be hemorrhaging pretty quickly, and then they're going to need more funding, and they're going to need to buy more Bitcoin, and it's a quick catching knife scenario at that point. So again, like
Yeah.
I'm not going to like really say I'm against crypto. Everyone knows my position on it by now. It's just like speculation, like treat it as you will, but I'm not a big fan of strategy.
Strategy. I didn't know they were doing a rebrand. That's so dumb.
Yeah.
Um, I agree. Like as soon as you start to say, yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to get to this price, I guess you also bring up a great point about diversification. How can you be all in on one thing like that and expect people to want to invest in that, especially when what they're investing in with you, they could just invest in on their own.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like if the strategy is all in on Bitcoin, then just buy Bitcoin, which I think is exactly what you said.
Yep.
Yeah, and now there was a period of time where it was opportune to buy MSTR, and that was the arbitrage opportunity that I laid out at the beginning of last year, where you had periods of time where MSTR's market cap was actually less than that of its Bitcoin holdings, and at that point it became responsible to purchase for that arbitrage and close that window. However, now MSTR I believe trades at a 3x premium to the asset value of those Bitcoin, or
Yeah.
close to it.
Why
Which
would
is
you,
very
why would
high.
you ever, yeah. So why would you ever buy it?
Well, I think the premise is, and I know one of our listeners who's punching the air right now. I believe the premise is that they're increasing the quote unquote Bitcoin yield, which is how much Bitcoin per share you own by owning MSTR. And that's basically just total shares divided by their Bitcoin holdings. But in any case, still, I think Saylor said he wanted to increase the number of shares to something like 10 billion shares. I don't know if you recall that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
So, between the dilution and between the idea that Saylor might be losing his mind a little bit, I'd personally rather just own Bitcoin. And that's what I do. I'm in the same boat as you with crypto. I'm definitely a little bit further along than you are with accepting it. Still, I'm of the opinion that it's something that should be speculative only. And that's how it is in my portfolio. I just own spot and that's it.
Yeah.
We haven't really even had time to think about crypto. Once maybe some of this stuff subsides with the government, if we start to get more activity in some of these other markets that were popping incredibly well before the inauguration.
We did have a press conference on crypto recently, but it was all about regulation of crypto, which is like the opposite of what crypto is. So I thought that was kind of a mixed thing where everyone was really hype about this new government speech around what crypto is, and everyone's excited about the integration to the government and maybe how it can be taken up into the treasury. And then they're like just talking about regulation. Like Bitcoin and regulation are opposites. So if that's what you're rooting for with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is government integration, which leads to regulation, then what's the point? It's just the dollar.
And that's the interesting thing about crypto. And now we're really getting into the weeds here, but that to me has always been an interesting thing about crypto, which is now you see so many more people talking about, oh, the US government needs a strategic Bitcoin reserve and all these other governments are going to follow. Okay, well, isn't that not the point? Like, wasn't the original point that there's no government involved and anybody can participate and, it's not controlled by any one entity? Well, now all of a sudden I see a lot more people reliant on government purchasing of Bitcoin to continue to drive price higher. And that's where it loses me a little bit, where I'm like, this is supposed to be something that everybody wants to own because of what it does for the population outside of government. But now everybody's relying on government to continue to push the price up. Is this something that you guys desire for the protocol, or is it something you desire for the expected gains of governments buying this and basically being your exit liquidity?
Yeah. There's a great quote in BoJack, a TV show. It's when you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. That's the same thing here that I kind of fear with the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency phase. And it goes back to actually summate this whole conversation, which is when you tie in a lot of emotion with business, or you like your perception or opinion on something that has a bias, like everything's going to look like it makes sense. But I have that fear for the crypto market and some of the big believers in it is that if it got to this point where there was like government interference and they did have a backlog and it became just regulated, it would still have all these benefits that's better than the dollar, right? Like that's what I have concern about, is that at what point I feel like they could just turn Bitcoin into the dollar and people would still think it's better just because it's Bitcoin. There's some crypto people listening to this that are losing their mind.
I know, and that's why I'm a little hesitant, because I know I'm going to get some interesting DMs later. You're dumb and wrong. But
show me value. Show me value.
Show me value. Yeah, it's quite literally our response to the crypto argument for the last 4 or 5 years, which is always met with, yeah, but what did it do versus the stock market? Which is, sure. But yeah, I think that about does it. Quick little episode today, little update. Just a heads up, we do have that article coming out tomorrow, and then we will probably have another episode coming out this weekend, assuming there's going to be more news. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but there will be something, and we'll get another episode out this weekend. But yeah, if you have anything else to close it off with, now's the time to do it.
No, that's it. Good pod. I'll talk to you guys later.
Peace.
Now watch this drive.